Dreaming of immortality at night and consuming the body during the day, this immortal is not like an immortal, and that demon is not a demon. With white bones and a sea of blood floating and sinking, this person is scheming and fighting, while that animal sits on the road and is revered. I have a blood pupil, originally unnamed, and I forcefully call it immortal. Keywords of the novel. I have a blood immortal eye without a pop-up window. I have a blood immortal eye. Download the complete set of TXT, and I have a blood immortal eye. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Using oneself as bait. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Using oneself as bait. Fallen leaves cover the grave, and wild grass covers the sunset. A cold wind blows, autumn leaves drift, and in the chaotic burial mound filled with a foul smell, a young Taoist walks forward with a bone sword made of polished white bones on his back. The bone sword has no scabbard, only 3 or 2 leather strips tied behind it. This Taoist named Su Yin was a Taoist boy from the Wudao mountain ascending Immortal Temple 30 miles away. He had little to do today, but after completing his job of washing blood, he exchanged 8 coagulation pills he had accumulated for months for the approval of the head of the same hospital, and was able to leave the temple for 6 hours. He was wearing a gray-blue Taoist robe, which was old and faded, but couldn't conceal the brightness in his eyes. Sword eyebrows and starry eyes, so be it. Su Yin stepped on the dry grass in the wasteland and walked towards the depths of the chaotic burial mound. The broken branches rustled, and the desolate wasteland seemed to have a glimmer of vitality. Wherever they went, there were dense white bones, with corpses half rotten but not rotting, flesh and blood blue purple black red, and white worms wriggling in the decaying flesh of the corpses. Ding Jiu is right. This place has deep yin energy, and resentment condenses into the cold. It is indeed a place where corpses and ghosts gather. It took several months of accumulation to earn this opportunity, and we must not miss it today. If we cannot succeed, we still don't know if we can survive until the next outing. Su Yin's gaze was firm as he carried the package in his hand and walked into the deepest part of the Yin Qi. The land here had turned black and condensed, and all around were some limbs and broken arms. Evil energy affects people's hearts. If ordinary mortals come in, they may be lost in their minds by the evil energy here, imagining it as a paradise in their hearts and ultimately becoming a fresh source of blood for corpses and ghosts. Su Yin looked around and selected a spot to squat down. He opened the package he was holding in his hand, which contained many bottles and jars. Using this night owl corpse powder mixed with 5 poisons corpse powder and refined black cat blood to draw a ghost suppression formation, it should be able to suppress the soul ghost's 30 breaths here. Kill it with 3 breaths. Su Yin took out an empty jar and quickly modulated it. After successful modulation, he took out a white bone pen dipped in blood ink and drew it on the ground. The blood ink solidified and did not penetrate. In 15 minutes, a 1-zhang square circle of talismans was formed. Su Yin breathed a sigh of relief and took a shallow layer of dust and fallen leaves to cover it. Then, he brought stones as his feet, dug out several tomb plaques as boards, and pieced them together to form a small table. Looking left and right, Su Yin brought some broken limbs and arms onto the table, dragged a thigh and placed it next to his right hand. He took out the white bone sword behind him and hid it inside. Now everything is ready, only the east wind is needed. Su Yin's gaze sighed and murmured to himself, if it were in his previous life, he would not have thought that one day he would appear at the mass grave. He has been in this world for 10 years and is now 16 years old. Last year, the Dengxian Temple recruited Daotong. The 3 brothers and 2 sisters of Su Yin's family were unable to support 7 people due to poor crop yields. Therefore, their parents asked their 3 sons to draw lots to decide who would come to the Dengxian Temple. One is one who eats less food, and the other is to receive food rewards after being selected. Although there is a chance to become a Taoist child at the Dengxian Temple, it is difficult. Most of them die, otherwise the Dengxian temple would not recruit a group of Taoist children every year. The lottery decision is actually to decide who will die. Su Yin did not smoke, but volunteered. It wasn't that he wanted to try this elusive path, but in the middle of the night before the draw, Su Yin, who had been awakened from hunger, heard his parents crying and discussing. They are all sons, with flesh in their palms and backs, but with only 2 sides in their palms and backs, it is impossible for a bowl of water to be even. The parents decided to use small means to give Su Yin a chance to win the Immortal Ascension Temple. Su Yin was not very upset about this decision, and he could understand it. After all, their true son had already died at the age of 6. Su Yin, who was not accustomed to this ancient impoverished world, was not close to his parents, and there was always a vague sense of estrangement. In the past, the eldest was seen as the future pillar of the family, and the youngest was the treasure in his hand. Su Yin did the most hard work and tiredness, but he didn't complain because there was a layer of barriers. If he wanted to eat, he had to put in effort. So he took the initiative to propose, avoiding the false part of drawing lots. Before leaving, my parents cried very sadly, and my siblings also cried sadly, all of which were genuine and sincere. The people here are just livestock raised in the Dengxian temple. Dao Tong, it's nothing more than preparing to be released from the cage. But there are also opportunities to become human. Su Yin murmured to himself, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The setting sun has set. The sky and earth are dim. Underneath the seat, a sense of melancholy and coolness rose upwards, and in the mountains, there were more inexplicable wild beasts roaring. Su Yin waited silently, and when the sky grew darker, he shouted loudly. Surprisingly, there is such a wonderful place to go in this mountain. Did you come to a fairyland in the mountains? Okay. Okay. It's really good. The immortals in the sky are not as drunk as me alone. This wine and food are so fragrant, even the dragon liver and phoenix marrow in the palace in the sky may not taste like this. Su Yin laughed and shouted, holding a broken arm in his hand. A rustling sound came from the wasteland ahead. In a tomb pit, a complete corpse slowly crawled out and stood stiffly, stretching its blue and purple arms. The linen clothes on its body had decayed. It still maintains a human-like appearance on its face, but it has lost its appearance, blood-red eyes, and protruding fangs. With a grin on his face, he walked towards Su Yin with his body as agile as an ordinary person. Brother. Why did you break into my house for no reason and eat and drink so much? Your family. Su Yin looked up at the visitor, excited in his heart, but remained calm on the surface, as if he had been influenced by evil energy and had seen a false image. You're also from outside, why do you just say this is your home? Call this house and see if it agrees. Hey. You young master really has sharp teeth and a sharp mouth. Bah. You have sharp teeth and a sharp mouth, and you speak casually with a yellow tongue. Okay, I don't have the same opinion as you. Since you like my house, you can stay here in the future. There are rooms everywhere here, so it's okay to prepare one for you. Really, it's true, I have good wine and meat here. You can eat as much as you want. The corpse spirit ghost looked at Su Yin, and its long, thin red tongue licked directly on his forehead, and the saliva flowed down. Su Yin chuckled and said happily, this is clearly an uninhabited land. I can live in any room I like. I even said this is my house. I also showed great mercy and rewarded you with a house. Yes, everything you said is right. The corpse ghost walked over with a grin and sat directly in front of Su Yin, casually picking up one arm and saying, these big meats are already smelly and not delicious. We need to eat fresh ones. Does it smell bad? I smell quite fragrant. Of course it smells bad, but young master, you're quite fragrant. Look at this pretty little appearance, and then look at this skin. TSK, it's delicate and tender, with a red face and white teeth. It's delicious at first glance. Me? Su-yin asked in reverse, and the mysterious god approached and said, "How about I tell you a secret?" The corpse ghost looked at Su-yin's neck and nodded, "Okay. Actually, I didn't have such delicate skin and tender flesh before. I used to work in the fields often. When I wasn't working, I either went up the mountain to catch rabbits or went down the river to fish. Now, I still have such delicate skin and tender flesh because of last year." "What happened last year?" Su-yin smiled kindly and answered the wrong question. "Do you think I'm wearing a Taoist robe?" The corpse spirit ghost was momentarily stunned, and before he could react, he saw Su-yin suddenly take out a yellow talisman and throw it to the ground. The yellow talisman was burned upon landing, and the ghost suppression formation was activated. A red light talisman seal light and shadow instantly brightened, encompassing a 1 zhang area. The expression of the corpse ghost in front of him immediately froze, and his body stopped moving. Su-yin quickly bent down and took out the white bone sword, quickly cutting out 3 swords. The first sword pierced through the heart and passed through the chest. The second sword pierced through the throat, picking out a bloody opening. The third sword chopped off the head and stabbed the heavenly spirit. After 3 swords, Su-yin's face showed a gentle smile that was harmless to humans and animals, and he happily said, "It's done." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Blood-Eyed Blue Sheep. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Blood-Eyed Blue Sheep. At this moment, the sky was not completely dark, and the chaotic burial mound was already dark. Su-yin held a white bone sword and looked at the corpse ghost with a smile at his feet, whose body had already separated. This corpse spirit ghost is no longer a human, with incomplete spiritual intelligence. If a normal person sees him in this Taoist robe, they will have a guess. In this world, there are 9 levels of immortality, with the 9th level being the lowest and the first level being the highest. This corpse spirit ghost is a corpse monster generated by the convergence of yin, evil, and resentment in the chaotic burial mound, and its strength is not included in the 9th level. Su-yin is also like this. He has been staying in the Dengxian temple for almost a year, and after completing his daily tasks of washing and washing, he only cultivates the heart and mind scriptures issued in the temple at night. The heart and mind classic is not an orthodox method of cultivation, but rather a way to enter the realm through external means. It can help people climb to the 9th rank. Su-yin only developed a sense of qi after 1 month of cultivation, and the first strand of magic was condensed after 2 months of arduous cultivation. Now, this strand of magic in the Dantian Qi Si is only as thin as bean sprouts and vegetables. He just activated the talisman and consumed 1/10 of it. However, although the refinement of mana is slow, the recovery and replenishment are rapid. Even if the mana is exhausted, it can be restored overnight. The ghost suppression formation was still shining, and Su-yin crouched down and held a white bone sword to scrape open the head of the corpse soul ghost, digging out a black and red ball from it. Corpse soul blood pearl, with this item present, it can stimulate the jade eye. Su-yin's eyes were excited. He held the corpse soul blood bead in his left hand and inserted the white bone sword into the ground in his right hand. He carefully took out the red thread from his neck, revealing a jade eye hanging on the red thread. Yumu presents a bright red color, pure and without impurities. This is his heirloom, not his home in this world, but it came with him from the time he wore it in China. At first, Su-yin thought that this jade eye was the reason for his life and must have great use, but it remained silent without any supernatural powers. Until he cultivated his first strand of magic, Yumu finally lifted the clouds and saw the sun, absorbing his first strand of magic and allowing Su-yin to obtain some information about this Yumu. Blood eyes can transform into the third day's eyes, with many mysteries, but there is a prerequisite for stimulating them, which is to sacrifice evil objects. He once tried every means to seek in the temple, but achieved nothing until he learned from Ding Juku that there were corpses and ghosts in this chaotic burial mound. It took him several months to prepare, only for today. Su-yin carefully took off the jade eye, held it in his hand, and pierced through the blood beads of the corpse's soul with the edges and corners. The jade eye slowly bloomed with blood, and the originally round and smooth blood beads of the corpse's soul instantly withered in one breath, leaving only a layer of blood clothing. Su-yin watched anxiously as the jade eyes changed. In the next moment, the jade eyes in his hands suddenly melted, and strands of crimson blood seeped into Su-yin's palm, swimming up his arm and finally converging in Su-yin's forehead. The body suddenly became hot and itchy, and Su-yin clenched his fists, enduring not to scratch with his hands. Time flies by quickly. After a quarter of an hour, all the abnormalities on Su-yin's body disappeared, and a standing blood eye appeared prominently on Su-yin's forehead. Su-yin looked around with a peculiar expression and muttered, "Is this the perspective of the three eyes?" It's so. In the bloody eye perspective, he could clearly see the yin energy emanating from around him. Although the sky was already dim, bloody eye could still see things and his eyesight was extraordinary. The blood eyes and heavenly eyes can pull the spiritual energy from heaven and earth into the body. In this way, the cultivation speed will change rapidly, and it is not difficult to enter the realm of 9th grade Qi introduction. As long as you step into the 9th grade, you can eliminate your status as a miscellaneous worker and officially join the Dengxian temple, becoming a disciple of the inner and outer gates of the temple. Su-yin's expression was joyful, and he pulled out the white bone sword inserted on the ground and sat cross on the ground, placing the white bone sword horizontally on his leg. With a thought, the blood eyes on the forehead were hidden beneath the skin and flesh, leaving only a blood eye line on the forehead. The blood color of the line shone brightly, pulling the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the body. The amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy pulled by the blood eye heavenly eye is dozens of times greater than that of the Heart-Mind Sutra. This is the first time he has pulled such a surging spiritual energy into his body. Comfortable and wordless. After practicing in place for 2 hours, Su-yin took a deep breath to end the cultivation, and the Dantian magic had grown even stronger. He requested a 6-hour leave from the head of the hospital and had to return within 6 hours. If he missed the time, he would inevitably be reprimanded. He has plenty of time left, and it's not difficult to get back to the observation center within the time limit. Su-yin tied the white bone sword back behind him, picked up the package containing bottles, jars, hummed a tune, and walked outside the chaotic burial mound. He left the wild ridge and took a shortcut along the mountain path back. The sky is desolate. Su-yin walked alone on the mountain path, listening to the roar of wild beasts in the forest, and his footsteps quickened slightly. Walking alone ahead, a little green light slowly appeared in the distance behind me. Su-yin turned around and walked faster towards the front, but the light behind him was faster. In less than a quarter of an hour, the light was getting closer and closer, with the sound of whips and the shouts of livestock echoing from behind. Creak creak the crooked and twisted wheels turned, and Su-yin placed his right hand behind his back, holding onto the hilt of the white bone sword, standing in place and looking back. It's a run-down flatbed car. The livestock pulling carts are not cows, but a young sheep the size of a calf. A young Taoist wearing a black Taoist robe held a small whip in his right hand and a lantern in his left hand. A green flame flickered inside the lantern, seemingly colliding with the cage that bound it. Sigh. The Taoist drove over to Su-yin and stopped, looking at him with 2 eyes. Yoha, you're still a miscellaneous Taoist in the temple. What did you do with these things? Su-yin Song opened the hilt of his sword and spoke calmly, as for senior brother, I will go to the mass grave over there. Burial Hill. That is indeed a good place for you miscellaneous disciples. I have heard that a new corpse spirit ghost has emerged in that place. You went there for that corpse spirit blood bead, right? Su-yin arched his hand and said, that's right. The young Taoist nodded and smiled, his expression reminiscing, once upon a time, I also went to that mass grave and almost stumbled in front of my horse and fell into the hands of 2 ghostly corpses. However, it was also thanks to that harvest that I was awarded the 9th grade and officially admitted to the temple. Su Yin's gaze twitched slightly, and he arched his hand and said, Senior brother, who also comes from a Taoist background, can stand out and become a disciple in the temple. Senior brother must be exceptionally talented. The young Taoist chuckled and moved his buttocks to the left, patting the gap on the right side of the cart and saying, I was just about to go back and observe. You're such a sweet-talking kid, so I'll give you a ride and come up. Su Yin didn't want to sit, but he didn't dare to refuse either. The deaths of most Taoist children in the temple were related to their disciples. The formal disciples have no right to refuse the practice of spells, attempts at elixirs, and so on by the miscellaneous disciples. Refusal is death. Thank you very much, senior brother. Su Yin made a gesture of gratitude and then stepped forward and sat down on the cart. As the cart was pushed down, the limbs of the Qingyang pulling the cart in front suddenly shook. Pop. The young Taoist raised his whip in his hand and whipped the Qingyang, cursing and drinking. Animal, this weight makes your limbs unstable. What's the use of it? Hurry up, and if it delays my time, I'll cut you alive. Qingyang is very spiritual and seems to understand people's words. Upon hearing this, his body was stimulated and he moved his 4 hooves towards the front, continuing to walk briskly. The speed is fast and steady, without any jerking sensation. Su Yin looked curiously at the Qingyang pulling the cart and whispered, Senior brother, this Qingyang is so big, and with this strength, is it an unremarkable monster? The young Taoist grinned and waved his small whip in his right hand again, hitting the buttocks of Qingyang with a pondering sound. Then, he smiled and said, This Qingyang is not a monster. When I use it, it has 4 legs, and when I don't use it, it has 2 legs. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. 9 Grade Bronze Armor Technique. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 9 Grade Bronze Armor Technique. Surprisingly, it's not a monster. Su Yin looked puzzled and pondered the meaning of the words spoken by the young Taoist. When used, it has 4 legs, and when not used, it has 2 legs. Su Yin pondered to himself, his eyes slightly touching, and he scrutinized the calf, the big green sheep, in front of him again. The size of the blue sheep was extraordinary, and if it weren't a demon beast, it would be about as tall as a human when standing upright. Is it difficult for Qingyang, who is pulling the cart, to be human? The young Taoist looked sideways at Su Yin with a green burning lamp, and when he saw Su Yin's expression change, he immediately smiled and said, You're a smart guy with a lively mind. I think you've already guessed. Su Yin pretended to be dumbfounded and said, Senior brother has lifted me up. I was thinking about why this Qingyang can sometimes have 2 or 4 feet. I haven't come up with a reason yet. The young Taoist chuckled and waved his small leather whip 3 times to whip the green sheep pulling the cart ahead, saying, If you don't know, then you don't know. I see that you have a strange face. When did you enter the observation? Last autumn. That will also be a year, and you can still obtain the qualification to observe. It seems that among your group of Taoist disciples, you are one of those who do well, and your intelligence has a good chance of becoming an outsider disciple. Senior brother's praise is absurd, I don't deserve it. The young Taoist smiled blankly and looked at Su Yin, asking, Do you still know your junior brother's name? Su Yin felt a thump in his heart. He now had the confidence to be promoted to the 9th grade in a short period of time, without taking advantage of others, and also had to guard against being seen by some people. To report to my senior brother, my surname is Ma and I am the 3rd in my family. My parents named me Ma San, but after joining the school, I changed my name to Ma Baoguan. The young Taoist nodded thoughtfully and suddenly looked at him with a cold gaze, saying, You probably didn't lie to me, did you? I hate being deceived the most. How dare I deceive my senior brother? I have also been bullied in the courtyard. If I could climb up a towering tree with an unlimited future like yours, it would be a blessing. How could I ruin my future? Su Yinsheng was worried. The young Taoist nodded slightly upon hearing the words, and his cold expression dissipated. He then transformed into a friendly smile and said, "That's right. Ma San, which part of the miscellaneous labor, which courtyard, and which room are you from?" "Report to senior brother, I am a person from the 9 houses of Zabu Jia Yuan. The Taoist servants of Dengxian Temple have 4 parts. Fire, miscellaneous, labor, and material. Each part is divided into 4 courtyards, and each courtyard is divided into 10 rooms. There are a total of 30 Taoist servants in each room. Supply Tong Yuan once a year in autumn." "Okay, I remember. If something useful comes to your place in the future, I'll naturally come find you." Yes, Ma San is willing to do his best for his senior brother. The young Taoist chuckled and waved the small whip in his hand, saying, "That's not necessary. Someone will take over the labor of dogs and horses. It's too unfair and mediocre for you to do this job." Su Yin glanced at Qingyang and didn't speak. The young Taoist chuckled calmly and said, "This person is from the first room of the second academy of the Ministry of Things. I used to be in this room, but I have been at odds with him. When I was promoted to the 9th grade, this person came to beg for mercy and was willing to do his best. Therefore, he has been safe among the miscellaneous Taoist disciples for several years. Whenever I travel, I do my best." Su Yin's gaze twitched slightly and he whispered, "Senior brother, don't you worry that he will also be promoted to the 9th grade one day. I'll say you're a smart person." The young Taoist laughed and whipped the Qingyang with his whip, saying, "I fed it poison pill, and it won't be promoted to the 9th rank in this lifetime. It hates me and hates me. What can it do? It's just a beast that I can call and wave away at will, just like a poor Taoist." Su Yin nodded in agreement and stopped speaking. Such a person who is struggling to survive and willing to be humiliated, this person is also the number 1 figure. Qingyang pulled a cart and walked quickly on the mountain road. After returning to Wudao Mountain, they followed the mountain road, passed the mountain gate, and stopped at a fork in the road. Wudao Mountain is very large, and further into the mountain, it is the activity place for the disciples of the outer gate of the Dengxian Temple. The miscellaneous Taoist children are all at the foot of the mountain. There are 5,000 laborers from the 4 ministries, and a large town is built at the foot of the mountain. The young Taoist waved his hand and said, "You go. Farewell to senior brother." The young Taoist nodded and swung his whip, driving the sheep cart towards the mountain. Su Yin watched the young Taoist leave, carrying a package and a white bone sword, and walked along the fork in the road towards Dengxian town. There are monster activities around Dengxian town, and there is only one way to enter and exit safely, with disciples guarding every day. Returning to the town gate, Su Yin took out a wooden plaque from his waist and handed it to the disciple guarding here. However, the disciple did not receive it. After scanning his eyes, he casually waved his hand and said, "Go in." "Thank you very much." Su Yin arched his hand and smiled, then quickly walked towards the town. It was already late at night, and the town was still brightly lit with people coming and going. Su Yin returned to the miscellaneous department courtyard and immediately went to the room at the head of the courtyard to gently knock on the door. "Who?" "Gu Yuanshou, I am Su Yin." The door opened and an old man walked out with a bow on his back. The thief glanced at Su Yin and said with a smile, "How did you get from going to the mass grave?" "Hey! Don't mention it, you almost folded there." Su Yin shook his head and sighed, then presented the wooden plaque with both hands and said, "Gu Yuanshou, your waist token." "Well, that mass grave is indeed dangerous. Some people have gained something, while others have died there. It's already good that you can come back alive. Go ahead." Su Yin is leaving. Su Yin bowed and walked towards his 1-bedroom residence. Turning into a small alley from the street, before reaching the location of a courtyard, Su-in saw more than 10 laborers waiting at the entrance of the courtyard. They were all relatively thin, and the leader was tanned and smooth, with a dog-tail grass in his mouth and a slanted gaze at Su-in as he returned. Yo ha! Where has Su-daedatong gone? What's inside the package? Su-in frowned slightly and said indifferently, Ma-san, what's the point of your coming from Jia Yuan to our Ding Yuan gatehouse? I lost my bet with you last time, but Ma-san is not satisfied. I want to bet with you again this time, and the bet is still 3 clotting pills. How about that? No interest. Su-in Ping spoke calmly. Previously, it was for the blood coagulation pill, but now he only wants to cultivate with his blood eyes as soon as possible and promote to the 9th grade. Su-in. Don't offer a toast, kid. Don't be punished for not eating. Ma-sanpei spat out the dog-tail grass in his mouth and stared coldly at Su-in, saying, I won your Ma-ye's coagulation pill and wanted to end it. It's not that easy. Oh. What do you want? Ma-san chuckled and, relying on his large number of people, laughed wildly, saying, one is to gamble with your master, and the other is to sneak under my pants. Ha ha ha. Drill crotch. Drill crotch. The group of Taoist children next to Ma-san shouted and cheered, while others in the same alley were curious to watch. In a courtyard, one by one Taoist children walked out and saw that Su-in was facing Ma-san. They immediately rolled up their sleeves and came to Su-yin's side. Have you all bullied our Ding courtyard? Do you want to take action? All right. The brothers will accompany you in 2 moves. Brother Su, we can fight whatever you say. Su-in nodded with a smile and whispered, you don't need to take action, I'll do it myself. The Taoist children around him widened their eyes, suspecting that they had heard the wrong thing. Ma-sanmu said coldly, do you want to take on our group alone? Su-yin's gaze was cold, no longer hiding his clumsiness. With the mysterious purpose of blood and full cultivation, he was confident that within 7 days, he would condense the cyclone and be promoted to the 9th level of qi-inducing initial state. Su-in raised his hand, and all of Dantian's magical power surged out and appeared at his fingertips. The magical power condensed into a special seal script, which then turned into a dim yellow light covering Su-yin's entire body. The surrounding Taoist children turned pale upon seeing the situation. Magic. Su-in knows magic. It's a 9th grade bronze armor technique. No, it's not powerful enough. This should be called, copper skin technique. Perhaps Ian did learn magic, but his mana was insufficient. Ma-san and the group of people behind him suddenly turned pale. Ma-san's Adam's apple rolled and he stuttered, Su-in. There are rules in the temple that prohibit mutual harm. What do you want to do? Su-in smiled slightly and said with kindness. Why not compete among peers? Ma-san's pupils shook and he immediately called out to the person behind him, but no one responded. Looking back, he realized that the dozen or so people were all 3 zhang away from him at this moment. You guys. Before Ma-san could finish speaking, Su-in rushed forward and punched him like a stone wrapped in iron, instantly shattering his 2 large white teeth. Woo-woo. Su. Bang bang. Woo. Brother Su. Bang bang. After venting well, Su-in scanned the room with a cold gaze and said, today's incident, everyone has rotted into my stomach. If an outsider knows about it, we can sit together in the same room and wait for me to be promoted to the 9th grade and settle everything one by one. The surrounding Taoist children felt a chill in their hearts and dared not look at Su-in. They all made excuses. Yes, senior brother Su. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Taking pills for cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Taking pills for cultivation. Su-in looked at Ma-san lying on the ground, softly howling in his Taoist robe stained with blood. Ma San, with a blue nose and swollen face, was suddenly startled. He curled up and wriggled backwards, clutching his crotch, his expression unclear and fearful, and said, "Senior Brother Su, I was wrong. Please spare me. I dare not dare again." Su Yin let out a low snort and walked forward to explore in Ma San's arms. He took out a black wooden bottle from it, pulled out the cork, and looked inside. It was 5 black and red pills with poor appearance and cracks. This pill is called coagulation pill. After taking it, it can strengthen the body and soul, and also enhance the speed of cultivation. The effect lasts for 6 hours. It's just that clotting pills are not included in the product and have a certain degree of toxicity. However, no one in the town cares about them. If there is a better choice, they naturally don't want to take clotting pills. But this slightly toxic clotting pill is also a salary that these miscellaneous Taoist children only have after working hard for a month. Su Yin obtained the position of head of the first room in Dingyuan 3 months ago, and his salary was only increased to 2 clotting pills, while Ma San was the head of the 9th room in Jiayuan. You only have 5 clotting pills. Su Yin stared at Ma San with unfriendly eyes. Ma San's throat turned fishy, and he struggled to kneel on the ground begging for mercy, saying, "Senior Brother Su, there really are only these 5 left." Today, he participated in a gambling game with itchy hands and lost 3 clotting pills. Su Yin sneered and kicked Ma San on the back. He let out a muffled snort, pursed his lips and dared not speak again. "Ma San, today is just a small lesson. If you live a peaceful life, I won't argue with you anymore. If you don't live a peaceful life, then it's not just you." Su Yin's gaze turned to the dozen or so Taoist disciples in the 9th room of the Jia courtyard and said indifferently, "If Ma San has any action, any of you who reports to me can be forgiven. Otherwise, none of you in the 9th room can survive this winter." More than 10 Taoist children's Adam's apple rolled, and bean-sized cold sweat dripped down. Remember Senior Brother Su's teachings. Get lost. Su Yin held a black wooden bottle and carried it into his arms, carrying a white bone sword as he walked into their courtyard. A dozen or so Taoists brought by Ma San quickly stepped forward to help Ma San leave. The Taoists in the room outside the door, along with Yu Rongyan, waved to the Taoists in the nearby room and said, "We're all scattered. Let's all go back and rest." The originally bustling alleyway children returned to their rooms one by one, still shocked in their hearts. This Su Yin was truly hidden. Su Yin returned to his room and walked straight to the back courtyard. Each room in Dengxian town was a second courtyard, with 2 rooms on the east and west sides of each courtyard. The maximum number of separate main houses in both courtyards was 1, totaling 10 rooms. In principle, 3 people would have 1 room, but whoever lives in the main house depends on who can accommodate the crowd. Su Yin lived alone in the main house in the backyard, took out the key and opened the lock. As soon as he entered the house and poured himself a cup of tea, footsteps gathered outside the door. A skinny young Taoist boy leaned in half of his body, grinning and calling out softly, "Brother Su." Su Yin glanced at it and gulped down the herbal tea from the bowl, saying, "Everyone come in. Let's all come in. Brother Su asked us to come in." Dang 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 dang. Young Taoist children walked in one by one, with different ages and heights, but they all had the same characteristic of being very thin. Su Yin glanced at a total of 23 people, the oldest of whom was 18 years old and had been in the temple for 4 years. He was an old fogey, the youngest of whom was only 14 years old. He was the same group of Taoist children who joined the temple with Su Yin last year. The one with the best relationship with Su Yin is the dark and skinny monkey named Dingjiu in front of him. He has been in the academy for 2 years and is 16 years old, just like Su Yin. "Brother Su, your 9th grade copper armor technique is really impressive." Dingjiu sincerely thumbed up and praised, his eyes full of admiration. Su Yindao said, "Lucky, I just have some understanding. By the way, I need your brother's help these days, Su Yin said again. Ding Julian waved his hand repeatedly and said, hey. Brother Su, if you have anything to do, just give orders directly. We're not outsiders, are we, brother a few? Yes, brother Su, just give me your orders if you have anything to do. A group of Taoist children echoed and spoke out, not to mention that Su Yin was originally the head of their room. With the strength demonstrated by Su Yin tonight, Taoist children from other rooms who want to bully them in the future must first weigh whether they can withstand Su's first beating. Su Yin nodded and smiled as he stood up to look at the many Taoist disciples and said, I will be practicing day and night these days. The chores assigned to us in the room are not light, but fortunately, we are still quite a few people, and on average, they are not heavy. From tomorrow on, I will need the help of my brothers to complete this task. May I ask if it is possible? Of course you can. Not bad, not bad. We have more than 20 people, and we only helped with Brother Su's job. Each of us only worked an extra 15 minutes, which is nothing. That's right, Brother Su, you can focus on cultivating with peace of mind. 23 people spoke to each other without any complaints. Su Yin was the head of the room, and Su Yin Chang was the only Taoist in the other rooms who dared not bully them. In the past, Su Yin San was deep, but his martial arts were impressive. They had a team of 20.4, making them a relatively strong team. Su Yin nodded with a smile and said, thank you all brothers. Su, you're welcome. A group of people chatted enthusiastically and dispersed, but Ding Jiu didn't leave. After everyone else had finished, he closed the door and whispered to Su Yin, Su, did you encounter a corpse ghost when you went to that mass grave this time? No one else knew that Su Yin had secretly left Dengxian town. There were many entertainment venues in the town, and others thought that Su Yin was going somewhere else for fun. Only Ding Jiu knew that Su Yin had left the town and gone to the mass grave. Su Yin nodded slightly and said, meeting someone is not a waste of this trip. Congratulations to Brother Su. Ding Jiu clasped his fists to congratulate Su Yin on his intelligence. After Su Yin returned this time, he no longer concealed himself, but instead beat Ma San severely. Now, contrary to his usual practice of day and night, he estimated that Su Yin had confidence in being promoted to the 9th level of Qi boosting realm and was about to leap over the Dragon's Gate. Su Yin glanced at Ding Jiu and nodded slightly. Ding Jiu had poor qualifications and had been observing for 2 years. His Dantian magic was only 3 times his level. After a moment of contemplation, Su Yin took out a black wooden bottle from his arms and handed a coagulation pill to Ding Jiu's hand. Take this clotting pill, thanks to your news this time. Brother Su, it's better for you to keep taking it. I have poor qualifications, and taking this clotting pill won't be of much use, Ding Jiu declined. Su Yindao said, I have a clear idea. Just accept it, and you can help me collect the 3 meals a day from the fire courtyard these past few days. I'm not very confident with the others. Ding Jiu saw that Su Yan's eyes were determined, and took the blood-clotting pill and said, well, don't worry, Brother Su, I also left a mantu and a steamed bun, and you can practice after you eat it. After Ding Jiu finished speaking, he turned around and pushed the door open before leaving. His room was in the east wing, and soon he came back with a bowl on the table and left again. Su Yan felt his shrunken stomach, and devoured mantu and steamed buns with herbal tea. Then he closed the door and sat in the bed, took a blood-clotting pill and began to practice. Although the coagulation pill has slight toxicity, he has been taking it for so long and is not short of these few pills. First, he will be promoted to the 9th grade for weight. After reaching the 9th grade, he will find a way to purchase a 9th grade detoxification pill. The faint blood and eye lines on the eyebrows absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the body, and Su Yin sat still, operating the heart and mind classic. The heart moves with the will, the mind moves with the mind, and the mind starts to think, like a tide, like a stream. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth enters the body, and the tides flow through the meridians and orifices of the body, running around the heavens, passing through the yellow court, repeating the four limbs, entering the mud pill, and then merging with the dantian. Practice is like a shallow dream, unaware of the passage of time. The sky is bright, and in just one short night, it is completely gone. In the room, Su-in was still immersed in cultivation, with unparalleled joy in his heart. Now, practicing overnight can be compared to an ordinary month. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Heart Demons Entering the Tao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Heart demons entering the Tao in the following days, except for Dingjiu, who would bring back Su Yin's 3 meals a day at a fixed time every day and place them at the door, and then knock on the door to remind him. No one else would disturb Su Yin's cultivation. The other Taoist disciples in the same room didn't speak loudly either, and each one remained quiet. The 23 of them seemed to be connected in a series, and after completing the tasks assigned by the higher authorities, no one wandered around the town. They all returned to their room, closed the door, and guarded the courtyard, practicing on their own, and adding a heavy guarantee to Su Yin. The 4 departments, 16 courtyards, and 160 rooms of the Taoist servants in the Dengxian temple are originally small groups of each other. It is difficult for the Taoist servants to survive, and if they do not join the group, it will be even more difficult. 6 days passed in an instant. At night, Dingjiu and a group of Taoist children in the room returned tired and carrying dinner. Today's task is particularly heavy. They came back early with many people, and some houses with few people are still busy. Hey! Today is the most tiring day of the month. I don't want to meditate tonight, so after eating, I'll lie down and have a good sleep. Yeah. According to Gu Yuanshou, the tasks during this period will not be light. Is something happening on the mountain again? This period is the time when our Dengxian temple recruits disciples every 3 years. With so many people and complicated matters, it's not all about us. Recruiting disciples. Do you directly enter the outer gate? That's natural, otherwise you would still be doing this lowly labor like us. How envious. Which one is not talented enough to directly become a disciple in the temple? Some of them are already in the 9th grade and members of various small immortal cultivation families. Their future prospects are limitless, unlike us who rely on luck to survive. Dingjiu felt a wave of envy as he listened to their discussion, but with his qualifications here, what could he do? You guys talk first, I'll go deliver food to Brother Su. Dingjiu said hello and quickly walked back to Su Yin's room in the backyard. He glanced at a bowl of rice and a piece of meat on the rice that had already cooled in front of the door and shook his head slightly. Su didn't eat it for lunch again. Dingjiu put down his lunchbox and brought out a bowl of steaming porridge, a stack of pickles and 2 hot mantou. Dong dong dong. Brother Su, I'll leave dinner at the door for you. Dingjiu walked to the window again and lowered his voice to remind him. At this moment, the door of the main house creaked open. Su Yin stood at the door, stretched lazily, picked up a bowl and took it back to the room. Dingjiu also came to help, curious and said, Su, why are you so punctual today? Su Yin smiled and said, at the last moment, we must take a break and rest to fully nourish our spirit and spirit. Dingjiu's gaze froze for a moment, then he lowered his head and said in a low voice with joy, Brother Su. Are you saying? You're about to break into the 9th level qi-inducing realm. Shu. Not counted until promoted. Dingjiu nodded repeatedly and said happily, congratulations to Brother Su. It happens that this period of time is when our Dengxian temple recruits external disciples once every 3 years. Brother Su, you happen to be able to start at the same time as those new disciples. Su Yin nibbled at the mantou and nodded slightly, which had nothing to do with him, and he didn't care about it temporarily. By the way, Brother Su, something happened yesterday about Ma-san. Ma-san. Su Yin looked up and frowned, what's going on? Ding Jiudao said, I don't know how Ma San offended an old man from a museum. He was set up by the other party to gamble at the gambling house and lost half of his life. Su Yin's gaze narrowed slightly, the elderly in the courtyard. It's the blue sheep pulling the cart. I heard from the people in their 9th house that Ma San lost all his wealth, lost one left arm, one right leg, and 2 eggs below. He also had his kidney dug out and a piece of liver cut off. Although he is still alive with a single breath, he is not far from death. TSK, this horse is arrogant every day in Sanping. He has been to the gambling house for a long time, and this time he has been hunting geese for years. He was pecked blind by the geese and deserves it. Su Yin nodded slightly and did not reply, eating mantou and drinking porridge, thinking that fortunately, he had carefully reported a false name. Evil people have their own ways of grinding them. Ma San is not going to die today, and he will also die tomorrow. His personality cannot survive in this immortal temple for long. After eating dinner together with the cold lunch, Su Yin slowly got up and Ding Jiu, who was sitting next to him, immediately said goodbye. Close the door again, and Su Yin sits on the bed to continue practicing the Heart and Mind Sutra. Within the Dantian, the mana was filled and gathered together, much stronger than his previous bean sprouts. The night was even darker, and Su Yin's blood eyes pulled the spiritual energy from heaven and earth into his body, revealing even more sharpness in his breath. At midnight, Su Yin, who was meditating, suddenly felt a chill in his heart, and there seemed to be a howling yin wind outside the room. A rustling sound and a series of heavy footsteps echoed outside the room. Suddenly, Ding Jiu's frightened sound echoed outside, and a scattered sound of footsteps and terror filled Su Yin's ears. Dong 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 dong. Someone frantically patted the door outside Su Yin's room, blood fingerprints pressed against it, creating an eerie scene under the moonlight. Su Gu. Su Gu, run quickly. Ma San has turned into a monster. Ah. No. Don't kill me. Monsters roared and chewed outside the door, and Su Yin's face turned pale as he gazed at the bloodstains on the door and the monster's shadow outside. He, Su Yin, you little beast, actually caused me to lose half of my body in gambling. He, I want to take it back from you, take your kidney, dig your heart, and then take your arms and legs to put on me. Su Yin's gaze changed, and his breath began to become somewhat chaotic. Impossible. Ma San can't possibly know. Fake. It must be all fake. There are 4 elders, 16 court leaders, and many guards in the town. A monster turned into a miscellaneous Taoist will be captured by the backhand, and it is impossible to kill them from the Jia courtyard to their Ding courtyard. Su Yin constantly advised himself in his heart to close his eyes and continue his promotion. The bigger the world, the greater the promotion. If the promotion fails, he will eventually die. Since that's the case, the flood outside his room is raging. He, if you don't come out, there's nothing I can do. Boom. The door was smashed into a mess, and a one-legged, one-armed, pointed-mouthed, and fanged monster walked in. From its appearance, it vaguely resembled Ma San. It held on to the dying Ding Jiu in its claws, and its tongue extended 3 feet long, licking it slightly. It pierced through Ding Jiu's chest and rolled out a still-beating bright red heart. Su. Brother, help me. Ding Jiu made a faint sound, his head tilted and completely lifeless. Su Yin was covered in cold sweat, beads of sweat as big as beans rolling down his forehead, his heart beating rapidly. Subconsciously, he wanted to turn over and run away, but was stopped by Su Yin's rationality. Cannot move. Even if you die today, you cannot interrupt your promotion. Su Yin's face turned pale, and he closed his eyes tightly as he focused on practicing the Heart and Mind Sutra. He. I'm going to take your kidney and put it on me. Ma San's hoarse voice rang in his ear, and a wet tongue rolled around his face. Su Yin ignored him. Time passed by bit, and Ma San still only licked him with a wet tongue without any other movements. In a daze, Su Yin's mind gradually became clear, his tongue spinning around disappeared, and there was silence all around. The room was still his, and the door was not broken. Everything went as usual. Fake. It is true that only he is covered in cold sweat and his Taoist robe is soaked. At the same time, he successfully rose to the 9th rank as usual, with a large amount of spiritual energy entering his body, and a large amount of magical power surging and condensing into a black cyclone within his dantian. As the cyclone rotated, strands of magic flowed towards the 4 limbs and returned to the dantian cyclone. During this process, Su Yin's physique rapidly underwent a qualitative change and his strength doubled. Promoted to the 9th level of Qi-inducing realm. Su Yin's gaze was joyful as he continued to stabilize his realm. At the same time, he pondered everything that had just happened in his heart and murmured, "It's the Heart Intention Sutra." Using a side door to enter the realm can attract the heart demon. If he can break through the heart demon level, promotion will be natural. If he can't break through it, promotion will fail. This evil thought demon is Ma San, probably because I have some sense of shame towards him in my heart. Su Yin shook his head and sighed. It's really difficult for the demon to enter the realm. I almost made it through this level. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Senior Brother and Junior Brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 7. Formation Road Seedlings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Formation Road Seedlings. The 8 external academies chose one, but this was not something that Su Yin could enter just by choosing which one he wanted. It was also a two-way choice between the 8 academies and his disciples. Fire Pill, Talisman, Heavenly Craftsmanship, 100 Arrays, Spirit Plants, Xian Gui, Yu Beast, and Si Ming are the 8 external academies, each with its own specialization. Choosing one of the 8 academies is also choosing a deputy position outside of one's own cultivation. Su Yin frowned and pondered, but Gu Yuanshou did not speak again. He took Su Yin straight out of Dengxian town and walked up the mountain. After a distance, he saw a mountain gate. In the depths of Wudao Mountain, there were numerous towers and Taoist courtyards, and many people came and went. Su Yin followed behind Gu Yuanshou all the way, and Gu Yuanshou also introduced Su Yin seriously. Before long, he took Su Yin to the Dengxian pavilion. Among them, there were several outer disciples wearing black and mysterious Taoist robes. When they saw Su Yin and his companions enter, they looked up and saw that Su Yin, wearing a miscellaneous Taoist robe, was actually in the 9th grade realm. Their eyes were also slightly surprised. These were new disciples promoted from the Taoist school. A middle-aged Taoist dressed in a black Taoist robe with silver embroidered cuffs walked over and looked up and down at Su Yin, nodding his head and saying, "Not bad." He stands out from the group of Taoist children at a young age and is a young seedling. Gu Yuanshou bowed respectfully and whispered, "Director Jiang, I brought him here to register his name." Jiang nodded slightly and waved to the outer disciples inside the pavilion, saying, "Please help him register his name and book, and then someone else will bring him the Taoist robe, magic sword, and Qiankuan bag." "Yes, you come with me," the young Taoist bowed and said to Su Yin. Su Yin quickly stepped forward and answered one by one under the questioning of the other party. After a quarter of an hour, the book was completed. Another disciple came forward and handed Su Yin a gray bag the size of a palm, saying, "This is a 9th grade Qiankuan bag, which contains 3 sets of disciple Taoist robes and a 9th grade magic sword. It is also a reward given by our Dengxian temple to external disciples." Su Yin took the Qiankuan bag and said, "Thank you, senior brother." With a slight expressionless nod, he returned to his position. At this moment, Gu Yuanshou also walked over and said, "Senior brother Su, I will take you to the selected hospital. Have you decided which hospital you want to enter?" Fu Lu Yuan. Su Yin said. The Fu Lu Academy is quite good, with a strong department. Learning Fu Lu can not only enhance one's own combat power, but also sell and trade the produced Fu and seal scripts. Gu Yuanshou nodded with a smile. Su Yin looked at the head of Gu Yuan and asked, "May I ask which courtyard's disciple senior brother is from?" "Me." Gu Yuanshou shook his head and chuckled softly, "I am a disciple of the 100 Formation Academy, but my cultivation in the formation is too poor. So far, I have only mastered 3 ninth grade formations, and they are all simple auxiliary formations. Not to mention that, now is the time to recruit disciples in the temple. Each courtyard wants to select some top students, and the requirements of these 8 courtyards are higher than usual. This is not good news for you, junior brother." Gu Yuanshou spoke softly and looked at Su Yin. Su Yin calmly said, "If you can succeed, then you will succeed. The 8th Academy is only a deputy position. Regardless of which academy's disciple, cultivation is the fundamental." "Junior brother, that's true." Gu Yuanshou agreed and glanced at Su Yin's tattered and ill-fitting miscellaneous Taoist robe. People rely on their clothes and horses rely on their saddles. Why don't you change the Taoist robe of this external disciple now, junior brother? Su Yin pondered for a moment and said, "Senior brother, what you said makes sense. So I'll replace it now. Quick change, quick change." This miscellaneous Taoist robe is still quite eye-catching among the disciples of the outer sect. Seeing no one around, Su Yin walked to a corner and changed his newly issued black Taoist robe. The robe was slightly larger, but it was harmless. The two of them walked side by side to another courtyard, where there were many young people, some of whom were younger and dressed in regular clothes. They were probably new disciples from outside the sect. There are 8 attics in the courtyard, each serving as the residence of the 8 academies. At this time, there is an elder leading the disciples in the courtyard to inspect the newly introduced disciples. It's really rare that there are the most disciples in front of the Seedlings Academy today. Gu Yuanshou exclaimed in surprise and quickly walked up to the elders of the 100 Formation Academy, bowing and bowing. "Disciple Gu Lang has seen the elders." The elder of the 100 Formation Academy is a chubby middle-aged man, wearing a Taoist hat and a navy blue Taoist robe. The cuffs and collar of the robe are embroidered with silver thread, and there is a golden line pattern on the chest. 100 Formation. The dean of the 100 Formation nodded and said, "You've actually grown up to look like this, but it's not bad that you're still alive. Less than 30% of the disciples who were admitted with you are still alive, and now you're a group of new little ones. Why are you here?" Returning to the elder, the young Taoist in the courtyard has been promoted to the 9th rank and has already been registered as a beginner. Now come and choose the gate of the courtyard. Dao Tong promoted. "I don't think this little doll is big either, come over here." The dean of the 100 Formation looked surprised and waved at Su Yin. Su Yin quickly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Disciple Su Yin pays respects to the elder." "Well, come forward." Su Yin took 2 more steps forward, and the elder grabbed Su Yin's wrist. A cold current rushed into Su Yin's body, and then the elder was surprised and said, "Your bone age is still less than 16. When did you become a Taoist?" Su Yin said calmly, "Last year." "Last year." The elders of the other 7 courtyards also looked over and looked at Su Yin. That would be less than a year. The Taoist was busy and had very little time to practice. The techniques he practiced were not orthodox Qigong techniques, but rather the heart and mind classic from other schools. It was difficult for the mind demon to enter the Tao, and you little child could achieve it. You little doll, since he walked out of his old hands, come to my 100 Formation courtyard. No way. The elders of the other courtyard suddenly spoke out. There are rules in the temple, and new disciples need to make their own decisions and pass the imperial examination before entering. "Do you want to break the rules, old man?" said the elder. The elder of the 100 formation courtyard snorted coldly and handed Su Yin a white jade piece, saying, "This little doll has come to me, naturally she wants to enter my 100 formation courtyard. Come, place this jade piece in the center of your eyebrows and close your eyes to explore." Su Yin glanced at the head of Gu Yuan, took the jade piece and placed it in the center of his eyebrows to explore. In the darkness, his blood eyes had a wonderful sense. Su Yin saw crisscrossing yet highly regular lines, patterns, and dots of light. Is this a magic formation? Su Yin pondered in his heart that blood eyes still had such ability. What did you perceive through exploration? Asked the elder of the 100 Formation Academy. Su Yin's mind was spinning. He wanted to enter the Talisman Academy, but at the moment, his blood eyes ability seemed to match the formation, which was beneficial for the cultivation of the formation. Returning to the elder, I felt lines, patterns, and dots of light in the darkness, many of them crisscrossing and regular. How much is a lot? Hundreds, estimated to be around 800. Su Yin does not intend to hide his clumsiness. If he wants to be valued, he must have the qualification to be valued. Upon hearing these words, Gu Yuanshou's expression froze and he looked at Su Yin with an air that dared not breathe. How could Su Yin perceive so clearly? Looking back at the time, he only sensed a dozen lines and patterns. Later, he found out that the object being tested in the 100 Formation Academy was called the Formation Jade, which can test the sensitivity of a cultivator's perception of the formation. The Dean of the 100 Formation looked surprised and asked, "What else is there?" Su Yindao said, "These lines and patterns seem to have different directions, brightness, thickness, and so on. The same goes for those light dots, as if they are a woven whole." All right. All right. All right. The old Dean of the 100 Formation's expression was mixed with surprise and joy, and he said 3 times in a row, "All right." The elders of the other 7 academies looked surprised. The formation was the most difficult to cultivate, and the disciples of the 100 Formation Academies were also the least among the 8 academies. I didn't expect such a rare formation seedling to emerge today. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Seed Quota. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Seed Quota. Su Yin opened his eyes and took off the white jade piece from his eyebrows, returning it with both hands. The elder of the 100 Formation Academy looked at Su Yin with satisfaction and said, "Your little child has excellent talent in formation. You should join our 100 Formation Academy. What's your name?" Disciple Su Yin. Register. The chubby old man didn't look back at the disciple behind him, and then looked at Gu Lang and said, "You, this old man, have also made a contribution this time by finding a good seedling like Su Yin for our 100 Formation Academy." Gu Lang immediately declined and said, "By chance, it's all because of junior brother Su's efforts. I dare not take credit for it." All right. The chubby elder waved his hand and said arrogantly, "Tomorrow, go to the resource pavilion in the courtyard to collect 30 inferior spirit stones." Gu Lang Muzi was pleasantly surprised. Even the 9th grade disciples of the 100 Formation Academy can only receive a monthly allowance of 5 lower grade spirit stones in the middle of the month. 30 inferior spirit stones have already been his allowance for 6 months. Yes. I appreciate the reward from the elder, disciple. Gu Lang bowed and expressed his gratitude, feeling even more joyful. Today was not in vain. Not only did he receive the favor of Su Yin, but he also received the reward of 30 lower-grade spirit stones. The chubby elder nodded and looked at Su Yin like a smiling Mithraea. A disciple behind him walked up and handed Su Yin an annotated bamboo text in a kind way, saying, "Senior brother Su, this is the admission permit. Hold this bamboo text and go to the hospital to report. The deacon in the hospital will arrange the rest of the matter." "Okay, thank you very much for the reminder, senior brother." "Junior brother, you're welcome." The chubby elder sighed and whispered, "I still need to host here today. I can't get away from it. Gu Lang, you should take Su Yin and arrange it properly." Don't worry, elder. I have arranged it properly for junior brother Su myself. Well, you guys go first. Su Yin bowed and bid farewell, leaving with Gu Lang. After leaving the venue for the trial, Gu Lang looked at Su Yin and sighed, Junior brother, your talent in formation is so strong that you can also get the seed quota for this year. Su Yin's expression moved and he lowered his head to look at the bamboo text in his hand, wondering, is this what senior brother is talking about? Exactly, every time new disciples are recruited by the 8th Academy, there are 3 seed spots available. Among the disciples of this generation, they are the 3 with the best talent and the most favored by the Academy, and their welfare benefits far exceed those of ordinary disciples. Gu Lang explained, pointing to Zhu Wen and saying, your team is one of the quotas. With this quota, the level of martial arts bestowed upon you by the hospital is different from ours. In addition, you have the qualification to enter and exit the Sutra Pavilion at will, a direct reward of 300 inferior spiritual stones, an opportunity to select a magical tool in the Treasure Pavilion, and a monthly allowance of 30 inferior spiritual stones. Su Yin looked happily and said, this is a great thing. Fortunately, my senior brother took me to the 100 Formation Academy before the selection test, otherwise I would have missed it and went to the Talisman Academy. Gu Lang nodded and smiled, perhaps this is fate, sometimes there must be in life. Su Yin asked again, senior brother, how did you address this elder just now? What is the situation with our 100 Formation Academy? Gu Langdao said, that was the 3rd elder of our 100 Formation Academy just now. He is a 7th grade Mingxian realm cultivator named Zhou Buyu. Don't be fooled by Zhou Changlau's kindness, but in fact, his methods are ruthless and he loves to skin and collect enemies. He is also known as Zhou Peeling, but it's good to talk about it behind the scenes and dare not mention it in person. There are 5 elders, 7 deacons, and more than 300 disciples in our 100 Formation Academy. Among them, the eldest elder and the courtyard master are both in the 6th grade of the Jidan realm, while the other elders are in the 7th grade of the Tamingshan realm. The 7 deacons are in the 8th grade of the Induction realm. However, these 7 deacons were originally disciples of the academy, but they stayed in the academy because the path had been cut off and the inner door was hopeless. Su Yin pondered in his heart and nodded slightly. There were still the least number of disciples in the 8th academy among the more than 300 disciples. At this glance, there were also thousands of disciples from both the inner and outer gates of the Dengxian temple. The 8 courtyards of the outer gate are distributed in different areas of Wudao Mountain, and within the peaks behind the mountain, it is the area where the inner gate is located. However, although the disciples of the outer gate have subdivided the 8 courtyards, their residential areas are mixed together. Under the leadership of Gu Lang, Su Yin arrived at the location of the 100 Formation Courtyard, where palaces and attics stood tall and occupied a considerable area. There were a few disciples walking and shuttling in the courtyard. This is the 100 Formation Courtyard, surprisingly so large and luxurious. Su Yin sighed. How could the facade be weak? I took my junior brother to the disciples' pavilion and quickly arranged everything, Gu Lang said as he quickened his pace. The 2 of them arrived at a high pavilion, where several disciples were sitting. Gu Lang looked at one of them and said, the new disciple has entered the hospital. Please ask the deacon to review the approval document. Oh. Seed quota. The deacon in the pavilion moved his expression and quickly stepped forward, saying, unexpectedly, on the 3rd day of this year, there was a seed quota. Junior brother, please wait a moment. I will go and invite the elder. The deacon in the pavilion spoke softly and immediately turned to go upstairs. After only 30 breaths, a thin old man in an elder's Taoist robe walked down the stairs and glanced at the approval document in Su Yin's hand in surprise. It's really a seed quota, Zhou Peipi gave it so decisively. Gu Lang gestured to Su Yin in his eyes and saluted, I will pay my respects to the 5 elders. Su Yin also followed the example of the chief inspector to pay his respects. The 5 elders waved in the air, and the bamboo text in Su Yin's hand flew out and landed in his hand. After a moment of contemplation, his eyes were surprised to look at Su Yin and said, "The talent of the formation is so high. Zhou Pipi, who is above the top, can even give you the highest level of armor." Su Yin. Less than 16, eh? He comes from a Taoist background and entered the temple last autumn. The 5 elders looked at Zhu Wen with even more surprise in their eyes, scrutinizing him back and forth and exclaiming with joy, "Okay. Okay. Okay. You're a good seedling, Su Yin, come with me." "Yes." Elder Wu turned around and walked upstairs, with Su Yin quickly stepping forward and following behind. After entering the pavilion, the 5 elders sat down at a table and looked in front of Su Yin's fingers, saying, "Sit here." "Thank you very much, Elder." Su Yin sat down and glanced at a small black box placed on the table. "I'm not playing any tricks, here are the rewards for this year's seed quota holders. Open it up and take a look." Su Yin lowered his gaze and eagerly opened the black box. The first thing that caught his eye was a cultivation technique called Yin-Yang 2 Qi Classic. In addition, there was also a 100 formation Dao Jie. There is another black iron token half the size of a palm, and a bulging black small bag. After Deng Shuyin saw something, the 5 elders spoke up and said, "This Yin-Yang 2 Qi Classic is the orthodox practice of my ascending immortal temple. Normally, only inner disciples can cultivate it, with the exception of the number of seeds. The 100 Formation Dao explanation is a collection of understanding and explanatory notes on the formation, including detailed explanations of 108 different levels of formation, which are equally precious. This black iron token is your privilege as a seed. With this token, you can go to the treasure pavilion to choose a protective tool, and you can also freely enter and exit the scripture pavilion to read the classics, letters, and spells. However, this token is only available to you, so do not give it to anyone else. In this bag are rewards for 300 inferior spirit stones, all of which will be collected into your Qianquan bag. The Yin and Yang Qi will self-destruct after 1 month. Remember to keep it on your back and not spread it privately, otherwise you will be sentenced to death." Su Yin respectfully said, "I know." Elder Wu nodded with a smile and said kindly, "There is a lecture on the formation every 3 days of the month in the courtyard. Whenever you have time, you come to listen to the class. As for the minimum monthly outing task for disciples in the temple, as a seed, you have the right to ignore it. However, I still believe that you can do it as you please. Although it is dangerous, it can increase your knowledge and skills. Note that fresh blood is the source of nurturing cultivators' strong growth. The disciple knows." Su Yin's expression was calm, and what he did and saw had already been deeply ingrained in his bones. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Blood Immortal Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Blood Immortal Eyes. Su Yin and Gu Lang did not stay in the disciple pavilion for too long. After taking the things given by the 5 elders, Su Yin said goodbye and left. Before leaving, the disciples in the pavilion gave Su Yin a formation command. Each disciple of the 8th Academy has their own unique welfare. The 100 Formation Academy is located on the formation path, and the exclusive academies assigned to the disciples are equipped with a set of 9-level protective arrays. The room assigned by Su Yin is the 81 courtyard in District A, which was the room of the former disciples of the 100 Formation Academy. After the death of the disciple, the room is empty waiting for new members to move in. Gu Lang brought Su Yin to the gathering area of the outer disciples, which was also like a town of immortals, like a big town in the mountains. In addition to the disciples living there, there were also various businesses such as gambling houses, restaurants, and brothels. There are many disciples walking on the street, and some of the shops on both sides of the street are for sightseeing industries, while the majority are rented by disciples to operate their own businesses. Junior Brother Su, although disciples within the mountain gate can fight each other, they must not be disabled, otherwise the punishment will be heavy. Starting with 100 spirit stones, if you need to use people to cultivate some special spells, then I will send you a few Taoist disciples. Gu Lang noticed Su Yin's curious gaze as he looked left and right, and spoke out as a reminder. Then he pointed to the shops on the left and right and said, "The one with gold patterns on the plaque is Guanzhong Industry, while the others are operated by disciples. The difference between them needs to be gradually understood by yourself." "Okay, thank you very much, senior brother. Thank you for accompanying me on this trip today." Su Yin arched his hand and smiled. He, it's not for free. Senior brother, I have grown a face and received a reward from Elder San. This is a rare benefit. Gu Lang smiled and pointed to a small alley paved with bluestone in front of him. This bluestone alley is from number 71 to number 99 in District A, and Junior Brother's yard is right here. Su Yin also quickened his pace and curiously looked at Gu Lang, asking, "Senior Brother usually lives in Dengxian Town. Isn't the courtyard here abandoned? Don't waste. Gu Lang waved his hand and smiled, grabbing his beard and said happily, "Our disciples of the 100 Formation Academy have a 9th grade protective formation in their yard. If other disciples want to decorate the protective formation, they need to buy their own flower spirit stones and ask our disciples of the 100 Formation Academy to help decorate them. After purchasing them, they need at least 50 lower grade spirit stones. I rent out my yard and only charge 5 lower grade spirit stones a year, and some people are willing to rent them." Su Yin nodded slightly, surprisingly so. The two of them walked quickly into Qingshi Lane, where almost all the courtyards were closed. There were also 2 courtyards protected by a magic formation. Gu Lang pointed to the 2 rooms and said, "The owners of these 2 rooms are also disciples of our 100 Formation Academy. However, I have been at the foot of the mountain for a long time, and no one knows who lives inside now. In the future, Junior Brother has the opportunity to meet them. Senior Brother, this formation has been on all along. How about the consumption of spirit stones?" Su Yin asked in confusion. "No consumption." Gu Lang waved his hand and smiled, explaining, "Under normal circumstances, the magic array can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on its own. Only under high-pressure operation can the spiritual energy of heaven and earth absorbed by the magic array not be sufficient to supply the consumption of the array, so spiritual stones need to be used as supplements." Su Yin's gaze twitched, and it turned out to be so. Quickly, the 2 of them arrived at a courtyard where the magic formation was open. There was a wooden plaque on the door wall, located at number 81, Area A. Su Yin took out the formation order from the Qianquan bag, and a strand of magic slipped into the order with his fingertips, whispering, "Qi." The formation emitted a white halo that fell on the formation. The formation suddenly opened a hole, and Su Yin pushed the door forward to enter. The courtyard was very clean, not like it had been unoccupied for a long time. It is estimated that the house was given to Su Yin shortly after the former owner died. Not bad. There's no need to tidy up anymore. I was thinking of sending a few Taoist boys to tidy up. Gu Lang clapped his hands and smiled, looking left and right, also very satisfied. Su Yin looked at the yard. The door was on the left, and in front of the door was the wall of the wing. Walking right after entering the door was the yard. To the right of the yard were 3 rooms. A kitchen, a wooden house, and a thatched cottage. Su Yin went into the main room again and looked around. In addition to the hall, there was also a bedroom, a practice room, and a storage room in the main room. "Junior Brother, I'll go down the mountain first. As for the 3 meals a day in your courtyard, I'll find a shrewd Taoist to provide. If you have any requirements for the food in the future, I'll directly inform him." Gu Lang looked around and said goodbye. Su Yin gratefully acted as a daoji and said, "Thank you, Senior Brother. After I stabilize my footing, I will invite Senior Brother to come to my courtyard for tea." It's easy to say. Junior Brother, take your leave and feel free to contact me if you have anything to do in the future. Gu Lang said politely again before turning around and leaving. After seeing off Gu Lang, Su Yin returned to the small courtyard, closed the door, and returned to the courtyard. There was a set of stone tables and benches in the courtyard. After Su Yin sat down, he took out the Yin Yang 2 Chi Classic from his Qianquan bag and began to look through it. As time passed and I flipped through it over and over again, the blood eyes hidden beneath my forehead suddenly changed. Su Yin frowned slightly and touched his forehead in confusion, saying, "What's going on? Why do you have this strange feeling?" Su Yin pondered for a moment, and the flesh and blood on his forehead cracked. Blood color appeared in his eyes, and the crimson pupils in his eyes turned. His gaze locked onto the yin-yang chi meridian placed on the stone table. Immediately after, a blood-colored pupil light suddenly burst out and enveloped the yin-yang 2 chi meridian. The blood-colored halo circulated on the yin-yang 2 chi meridian, and in the blood eye's sight, the text of the yin-yang 2 chi meridian suddenly came to life and entered his eyes. The obscure and difficult to understand scripture was instantly unforgettable and more easily understandable. In his eyes, a blood-colored little man is practicing the yin and yang chi meridians, and the two bloodlines in his body flow. The path to the acupoint, which meridian, and the root of operation are all imprinted in his eyes, and he cannot forget them. After a quarter of an hour, the blood halo on the yin-yang meridian disappeared and remained ordinary once again. But Su Yin had already familiarized himself with it in his mind, as if he had practiced it countless times. Su Yin's eyes trembled with surprise. With the assistance of this pupil, the immortal path can be achieved. Su Yin's expression was joyful, and the blood pupils in his forehead rotated and scanned. In the blood pupil's line of sight, the pattern of the courtyard was composed of flowing patterns, and all the structures were fully visible. All things in the world are originally unnamed, and after the birth of people, many names appear to be called names. Your blood eyes accompany me on the path of immortality, so I should also give you a name. Born with blood red, help me become an immortal. How about calling you Blood Immortal Eyes in the future? Okay. Su Yin muttered to himself and immediately sat cross-legged on the table to operate the yin-yang 2 Chi Classic. At the same time, his blood eyes pulled the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body. After running for a week, Su Yin slowly opened his eyes and murmured. The harmony of yin and yang, the never-ending generation, is truly mysterious. With the support of the blood immortal eyes for cultivation, at this speed day-night, one can condense a second cyclone in half a month and promote to the middle stage of the chi-generating realm. I don't know if the 100 formation Dao Jia is effective, Su Yin muttered and quickly took out the 100 formation Dao Jia to try with blood immortal eyes. The blood immortal eyes emitted a beam of blood light that fell on top of the 100 formation Dao Jia. The text on it penetrated into the eyes one by one and changed. In a daze, Su Yin saw the process of each formation from construction to dismantling. When Su Yin regained his senses, he suddenly realized that the original day had turned into night, and the blood immortal's pupils were extremely sour. His whole head was also drowsy, as if drunk. Su Yin shook his head, his blood fairy pupils hidden beneath his flesh and blood. Even though he was mentally exhausted, Su Yin's eyes were as bright as stars. With this ability, his learning and comprehension speed will be greatly improved. Su Yin stumbled into the room and collapsed heavily on the bed. Before falling asleep, there were only two thoughts in his mind. Firstly, do not use your eyes excessively. Secondly, the strength is too weak. First, stay in the courtyard for half a month, break through the middle stage of the chi-inducing state, and then go out. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Little Five Elements Tower. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The Little Five Elements Tower. Half a month later. Early morning. In the yard of number 81 Qingshi Lane, a tall, thin, and slightly white laborer Dao Tong respectfully waited outside the entrance of the formation, holding a food box. Suddenly, the courtyard door opened, and Su Yin held the formation command to open the formation. He glanced at the food box in Dao Tong's hand and casually asked, "Shi-san, what did you prepare this morning?" In Elder Marshal Brother Huey's words, "It's bacon and fresh congee, with fried cabbage and carrots, and a cage of steamed buns." "Well, come in and put it on the table. You don't need to bring me food this afternoon, nor do you need it tonight. It's senior brother." Shi-san respectfully spoke up and followed Su Yin into the courtyard with a food box. After taking out the rice, he put the empty bowl from last night on the stone table into the food box and said, "Senior brother, Shi-san will bid farewell first." Su Yin nodded slightly and said, "Go." After half a month of seclusion and staying indoors for half a month without going out, Su Yin's cultivation finally reached the middle stage of the qi-inducing state. The cultivation level in the middle stage of the yin qi realm is not the weakest among the disciples of the outer sect, so they have some confidence. They will go to the courtyard later to receive the rewards for the magical tools, and also need to go to the scripture storage hall to select some suitable spells. Su Yin pondered in his heart as he wolfed down the remnants of the storm and wiped out all the breakfast before leaving Qingshi Lane for the first time. All the way to the 100 formation courtyard, they didn't even recognize each other at first glance. They just nodded slightly as if they had met, and their faces were familiar. As soon as Su Yin walked into the courtyard wall where the treasure trove was located, he felt a feeling of being watched, but it disappeared in an instant. "That kid, this is not the place you can come from, leave quickly," someone in the treasure trove said. Upon hearing this, Su Yin took out the black iron token and made a Taoist priest, saying, "Disciple Su Yin, specially came to the treasure pavilion to select magical tools." Are you Su Yin? Everyone else comes to pick out magic tools right away. I've been guarding the treasure pavilion for many years, but I haven't seen you so slow. Come in. The door to the treasure pavilion opened. "Thank you very much, Elder." Su Yin bowed and quickly walked into the treasure trove, his gaze fixed on the thin old man lying leisurely on a rattan chair in the pavilion. He was very low in stature, one head shorter than Su Yin. "How do you call Elder?" Su Yin respectfully asked. The skinny old man opened his eyes and turned to Su Yin, asking, "You have been hospitalized for half a month and haven't even explored the information in the hospital." Su Yin explained calmly, "Elder, don't blame me. My disciples are delighted when they see the hunt. They first learn the yin and yang qi classic and are happy to practice it. I haven't been out for half a month, and today is my first time." The skinny old man nodded slightly, his gaze scrutinized up and down, and suddenly his eyes moved and he exclaimed, "In the middle of the yin qi realm. In just half a month, you have comprehended the yin-yang 2 qi classic and even reached a small realm." Su Yin nodded honestly and said, "I have a little bit of intelligence." The skinny old man looked surprised and said with satisfaction, "No wonder Zhou Peipi gave you such a high evaluation. You didn't go to the last battle, and he even went to your courtyard to inquire about the reason, but it seems like he hasn't seen you. Did the 3 elders actually come to the yard?" Su Yin's gaze was surprised. He was indeed unaware of this matter. The courtyard protective array had a sound insulation effect, and he couldn't hear any external sounds. Shi-san had to wait for a while to deliver food to him. After finishing speaking, the skinny old man stood up and patted his buttocks, saying, "My elder's name is Wang Chun, the 4th elder of the 100 Formation Academy. Remember, don't even know who I am next time you see me. Please remember, disciples." The 4th elder nodded and said, "You came late. There are only 4 of the 6 optional magic tools prepared in the courtyard this year." With a flick of their sleeves, the 4 elders heard a commotion in the attic, followed by 4 magical tools wrapped in a ball of light flying down from above. Su Yin looked at these 4 magical tools. A black flag, a 5-story white tower, a red skin gourd, and a bone ruler. Elder, could you give me some tips? Su-Yin spoke shamelessly. He, this is breaking the rules. You can't speak, you can't speak. You choose yourself, and after you finish choosing, I will introduce you well. The fourth elder looked at Su-Yin with a cheap smile, as if waiting for Su-Yin to pick a bad one, and then he came out to announce the answer. Su-Yin suddenly made a mistake, which one should be chosen? This white bone ruler seems to be an attack-type magical tool. He has the 9th grade medium-level magical tool long sword that he rewards as an external disciple. This attack-type magical tool is temporarily sufficient, so the white bone ruler should be eliminated first. The other black flags, 5-layered white towers, and red skin gourds, from the appearance, should be both offensive and defensive. The 5-layered white tower should be more inclined towards defense, while the red skin gourd is completely invisible to him. How about it, kid? Have you considered which one to choose? The fourth elder asked with a smile. Forget it, don't worry. Instead of gambling on this red skin gourd, it's better to choose between the other two. Elder, I choose this 5-story white tower. Su-Yin raised his hand and pointed to the white tower in the air. The fourth elder nodded and smiled. If you're sure to buy it, then let's decide on this one. This artifact is called the Small 5 Elements Pagoda, the 8-rank Jew and other artifacts. It is made of alloy wood, water, wood, and earth elements. The metal layer can concentrate and control 3 golden light swords to kill enemies, the wood layer can activate the Imu Xian light to heal injuries, the water layer can transform black water poison cables to attack enemies, the fire layer can release ghostin fire to burn enemies, and the soil layer can activate the membrane barrier for defense. After the fourth elder finished speaking, he smiled and said, "This small 5 elements pagoda is made by imitating a real 5 elements pagoda. Its power is not small, and it has both offensive and defensive capabilities, and can also heal injuries." Upon hearing this, Su-Yin's face also showed a smile. There were 4 types of magical tools. Lower, middle, upper, and Jew. This small 5 elements pagoda was chosen correctly. After Su-Yin reached out and took the small 5 elements pagoda handed over by the fourth elder, the fourth elder continued, "This banner is called the Refining Ghost Banner. It is an 8th grade top-grade magical tool, which contains a ghost object. Its strength is comparable to that of a late-stage cultivator in the induction realm. The Refining Ghost Banner is a common magical tool with different grades, and it is deeply loved by the disciples of the Si Ming Academy. This ruler is called the Sha Bone Ruler, a top-grade 8th grade magical tool. It is an attack-type magical tool with good power, and can also stimulate the energy of bone evil to disturb people's minds and make them feel dizzy. As for this last item, the fourth elder showed a wicked smile and said, "The Blood Crow Gourd is a top-grade 7th grade magical tool with irreparable damage inside. Now, its level is barely below 7th grade. It can release a group of bloodthirsty demon crows to surround and kill enemies. The power of the Blood Crow can even contaminate and erode the tool until it is destroyed, making it a mortal object. How, have you ever regretted it?" Although Su-Yin looked surprised, he didn't regret it and said, "Although this Blood Crow Gourd is of high grade and powerful, with my current cultivation level, the little 5 elements tower is more suitable for me." The fourth elder nodded slightly, waved his hand and sent away 3 magical tools. He then lay back on the wicker chair and closed his eyes, saying, go ahead. I need to sleep. Farewell, disciple." Su-Yin bowed and saluted, putting the small 5 elements pagoda into the Qiankuan bag and walking outside. As soon as he stepped out of the treasure pavilion, he heard the fourth elder say again, "Your talent is good, so you should act more steadily. Think twice before you act, plan before you act. Don't die too early and waste this talent." Then with a loud bang, the door behind closed. Guanzhong adopts a form of free range for disciples, even for seeds, they only lean towards resources, and there have always been many seeds that have died outside. Su Yin turned back to ponder, bowed again, and then strode away with a meteor, heading straight to the Sutra Pavilion. He searched through the pavilion for a while, and finally borrowed 5 ninth-grade spells from the pavilion. End of this chapter.